Chapter 1 The Shitty Life of Albrecht Drue, Verse 1 Bitburg, 2000 something. Albrecht Drue lived in a hole. Not a nasty, filthy, wet hole, nor a dry, sandy, dark hole. Albrecht Drue lived in a shithole. Not just any shithole either. Al lived in the kind of shithole only a true drunk can tolerate, abounding with the trappings of loneliness, manic enjoyment, and raging frustration, left by years of regular benders. Overlooking the scenic alley that separated his craft trap apartment from a sweatshop notorious in its day for production of sex toys and dead Chinese, his shithole had windows on two sides and seemed to have been designed specifically so that no matter what time of the day, if the sun was up, it would bore straight into the occupant's skull. If he'd had the energy to bother or the shits to give, Al could have put up some blinds and maybe avoided the daily battle between the sun and his need to sleep off the previous night, but he didn't have the energy and he didn't give a shit. He knew just about every morning he was going to get up, spend around 3 hours retching bile into the filthiest toilet on the East Coast, and then douse his guts in half a bottle of tonic spiced with a liberal shaking of Angostora's bitters. Once that proven capable of remaining inside of him, he'd head down to the Klops for the food and whiskey. He might shower at some point, but more likely he'd just whore bathe in the sink, change his shirt, and remind himself he didn't give a shit. He was, after all, a drunk and had an image to maintain. Most days, he also managed to work in a good hour or two of active self-loathing over how he wasn't doing a damn thing with his miserable life, then justify it with recriminations over how the one thing he'd ever been good at, punching people, had been taken away from him. He'd lost the limp that kept him out of the ring a long time back, but that didn't matter much anymore. Today, however, was not most days. It was one of those rare days when the normal comforts of his routine would not be on the agenda. Today was those most magical of days, a day that made all other drunken, useless days possible, a special day that came once a quarter and reminded him that he was living the dream. A check day. Check day meant that Al had to be presentable. Being presentable meant that Al had not only to shower and shave, but wash his hair. All that mess he let slide other days, it also meant he was going to have to talk to people. And if Al had to talk to people, he was going to have to make sure he wasn't so dry that every word came out in a shaking stammer, but not so drunk that they came out sloshing louder and more profanity-ridden than he intended. A certain level of profanity was to be expected, but there's a fine line between calling an acquaintance a righteous fucking dude and calling a stranger a cock-gargling rape shitter, even if that made no fucking sense. So, lying there on the dirty, sheetless queen mattress atop its mismatched twin-size box spring that jutted out like a Dr. Pepper-stained island from a sea of laundry he'd neither washed nor worn in months, empty liquor bottles, most of them plastic handles, because, again, Al doesn't really give a shit, and the tear-off bits of Netflix mailers. Al opened his eyes and stared up at the ceiling in an effort to remember where he was and to gauge the morning's level of discomfiture. The sun hit him full force and provoked from within him vitriol so blue Gainsborough could have painted a little boy with it. Like chunks of corn in a puddle of greasy hangover shit, glossy tatters of 3.5 by 2-inch cardstock confetti, strewn among the floor-level jetsam, caught the solar light and reflected it up against the wall in the variegated colors of a pride parade. Each scrap, embellished 70-weight high-gloss technochromatic vellum, was a slender, shiny needle in Al's eye, stabbing deeper than he remembered what they were, and after last night's hijinks, he'd have a whole new batch in a couple of days. See, once every couple of months, Al would get a certain type of fucked up and start thinking about his future. He'd come up with some grand plan that needed just one little spark to set him ablaze with the inspiration he needed to launch his new life. He'd fly wild-eyed and vital to the computer and order up a brand new set of custom business cards, destined to arrive well after that burst of desperation had faded, and made the little cardstock rectangles, perfect talismans for the new life upon which he was about to embark, emblazoned with things like Albrecht Drue, problem solver, or Albrecht Drue, hired goon, or Albrecht Drue, philosopher, obsolete. Inevitably, he'd tear open the boxes in a fury, and they'd end up scattered on the floor, soaking up the grime, the sweat, and the filth of Al's shithole. Tens of thousands of paper reminders of all the things he wasn't and would never be. When the booze was humming in his veins and the autumn breezes funneling through the hateful open window, they'd come together and swirl around him like a swarm of tangible recriminations, and Al would have himself a good old bout of poetic self-hate that would last him until he felt like doing it all over. This time, changing the white to bone and finally getting the type just right, because he had to do something with his life, and seeing how goddamn long it was taking for him to die. Looking above him was the ceiling fan was still. Must be cold out, he figured, or he would have turned it on last night. Al looked into the darkest corner of his shithole and he saw the computer was still intact. The TV, too, was still on, tuned to one of the shittier Hitler channels because those stayed on 24/7, even if they tend to show the same damn block of 3-hour shows over and over. Today's block was about Bigfoot and aliens, about whether Bigfoot was secretly an alien. Al had a hard time separating them anymore, but he was pretty sure that Georgie Tsoukalos was on, and that guy wasn't saying Bigfoot and alien, but it was aliens. He fished around in the mess beside his bed, and we came up with a home wrecker of Aristocrat vodka, surprisingly unopened, unspilled, and undrunk. One thing about Aristocrat, Al said to no one, if you're drinking it, you're not one. That's great. One thing about Aristocrat, Al said to no one, if you're drinking it, you're not one. Forcing himself to, really, because it made the day and the cheap booze go down easier, he uncapped the jug and took a swig, let it settle, and took another. Yeah, that'd just about do to get through his daily ablutions. Hold on, I'm reading. We have a guest star on Read Aloud today. It's a small, pointy cat. Suddenly, Al got the distinct feeling he was being watched. Not just watched, but sized up. Someone or something was taking his measure, and his buzzing head aside, he was going to have to act. It was that fucking cat at his window again. He looked over, and the thing stared him down. It was a big orange waste of breath that never missed an opportunity to shove his enormous cat balls in the face of anyone whose path he crossed. Maybe that's why Al liked him so much. All right, boyo, said Al, kicking a path through the crap on the floor of his window. He dug out the canister of dry cat food he'd left on hand, dumped some in a bowl, and set it outside the sill for the little bastard. That's why life is so great, because I'm reading this book, and my youngest child comes out and shoves a cat in my face. I love my cats. We have 5 cats. Oh, have a great show. Oh, same. Jesus loves you too, baby. Thank you for reminding me. And all of a sudden, serendipitously, in the book, he's talking about cats. All right. Boyo complied, even without a thank you. He tore into the kibbles and scarfed them down, looking over his shoulder when he finished, lifted his tail erect, and sprayed the window with more urine than Al figured was necessary. Well, that answered where the cat was. The only question was, where the fuck was the snake? Al was the first to admit that his life was not only drunk and shitty, but even kind of weird, even for Bitford. Take, for instance, the snake in his mailbox. Ever since he was a kid, he'd been deathly afraid that should someone choose to assassinate him, they would enjoy the time-honored method of hiding a deadly asp in his mailbox. If you thought about it, it was a perfect method for taking somebody out. Unsuspecting target casually, probably a little more in gym shorts and a hoodie, goes to the check, opens his mailbox, and boom, a deadly asp bites him on the wrist, slithers away, and all you're left with is dead Al. The fact that no one could pin anything on him warranting assassination never played into Al's thoughts. It was just one of those fears people have. The perverse thing was Al had indeed gone out of the mailbox, clad in only the finest of unwashed polyester rayon short pants and matching hoodie, and found a venomous serpent in his mailbox not 3 weeks before check day. Stranger still, the thing had steadfastly refused to bite him, thus ensuring, should he ever come across a snake in his mailbox, Al would question its heretofore obvious motives. The really weird part, that he'd allowed the thing to follow him upstairs to a shithole and generally have its run of the place. After all, if he hadn't killed it on sight, odds was it was laying in the long con, waiting for him to drop his guard so it could murder him in a way that had yet be defined in terms of embarrassment. Panicked, Al threw his gaze toward the computer. Sure enough, it was open to a thumbnail porn site, his Desk Babes catalog, and the cam chat site he went to when he wanted to watch drunk girls get naked. If he was going to die a shameful passion, this is exactly the scenario the snake would have planned. But his chair was empty, the space for his feet clear. The aristocrat had obviously raised him above his station, so he figured fuck the snake, decided he'd better go ahead and get cleaned up so he could meet Ari at their prescribed time. After all, punctuality was the key to social contracts, and Al was nothing if not punctual. Punctual and generally mindful of fire hazards. Yeah, that's funny. Hey guys, all right, well that's chapter 2 of Albrecht Drue, Ghostpuncher, and I'm gonna go back to the yard and get some work done. I got some lawn mowing to do. Anyway, if you like this and you want to hear me read some more, hit your like and subscribe button, and I'll be back with more Albrecht Drue when the time is right. All right, thanks guys.